Hey guys, it's Noir Tapes back again with another video. Today I want to do some tips that I use for cutting up drum breaks. I love to chop old drum breaks. I think it really adds a vintage flavor to a lot of boom bap beats. You can always take drum samples from drum kits and make drum loops, but I always think that having the vintage flavor is something that's missing. They always use a lot of old drum loops in old school hip hop, so it's like it just makes sense to take from the predecessors and modernize it, right, and bring it to the new generation. So I don't often just chop up a drum break. I do sometimes, but not very often. I prefer to take out the individual drum hits and flavor them to the style I'm trying to make. So I'll start with this drum loop. And my first tip was just based on chopping the drum loop and just some manipulation advice. So I've just chopped it up, nothing fancy here. And what I wanted to talk about was when you play these chops, how to get it to fit to different tempos. You'll hear if I play these a bit faster, let's say I've sped up the tempo, you'll hear the samples are going to chop each other off, and if I did it slower, there'll be a space in between. So if I play it faster, almost has that like bluesy Elvis sort of feel, but that's not what we're trying to do. And if I slow it down, there's space in between, it doesn't sound very good. So what I wanted to talk about was using pitch to make it fit to different tempos. You can always warp it. I don't like the warping in the MPC. I think it sounds kind of garbage, if I'm honest, even though it still uses the same pitching formula as in Ableton, which makes no sense because in Ableton the pitching sounds incredible. So I really don't know. What you do is you just go into your program and you go to global, or you can change individual chops, up to you. So if I go up maybe 2, you'll hear how much quicker the drums are, right? And if you were going to go to a slow tempo, you can just pitch it down. As I said before, I don't really just chop up drum loops and use them like that. In Ableton, I sometimes do, but I can also get away with a lot more manipulation. The pitching sounds much better in Ableton. You can use the beats formula, and it will sound much cleaner as you repitch it. And yeah, it's much easier in Ableton to use a drum loop. You can just chuck on the warp markers and put it in on time, and then when you adjust the tempo, it just sticks with it and it sounds incredible. So in the MPC, I don't do that too often. I'm not a huge fan of using the drum loop as it is. I just like taking little pieces from it. But that was the first tip. If you want to chop the drum loop and not warp it, you'll achieve the most natural sound, but just make sure you repitch it when you're moving up and down tempos. So I'll show you the chops I did here real quick. So all I did when I'm chopping up the drum loop, I'm just grabbing one of each sound. I might grab multiple hi-hats, or if there's snares at varying velocities, I might do that. But usually I just go for one of each. One snare, one hi-hat. I don't grab the kicks, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But let's go grab a snare. So I'll just put the start point there, and I'll move the end and I'll zoom it in a bit. You can hear that hi-hat at the end there. So let's just move that. Easy. We got a snare, right? So I'll go process, extract, give it a name. I'll just call it SN, and then hit do it. And then I'll do the same thing for a hi-hat. Here's a little bonus tip if you're interested, I guess. What am I saying? Here's a little bonus tip. I don't do this all the time. I know one of my favorite YouTubers, Marlo, he does this a lot when he uses his MPC. He loves to grab double hi-hats. Sometimes I think it sounds better just to take the one hi-hat and just play it 16 levels, and it sounds a bit more natural. In some cases, like this one, we've got this sound. It does sound better to take both, I think. You'll see once I process it a little bit, it just sounds incredible. So we'll do the same thing for this one. Process, give it a name, hi-hat, and do it. Alright, so we got 2 sounds here. What I like to do to clean these up a little bit and make them sound better, first thing you do is come in, you hit warp samples, and you go to the envelopes, add a tiny envelope. All that's going to do is stop clicking at the start and the end of the sample. Makes it clean it instantly, so I'll do that for both. Quick envelope, just to clean up the sounds. Other thing I like to do is add filters. I need to do a video. I reckon I'm going to do a video called The Art of Filtering, and I'll make a big in-depth thing about filters. I love filters. Marlo really put me onto these as well. I like filters in general. I've always liked them, but the way Marlo talked about it really made me do some sort of philosophical thinking, you know, like using an EQ compared to the filter. The filter just adds a color and a texture, and I'm totally in agreement with that. So for my snare, I like to add high pass to get rid of the lows, because you don't want that sub frequencies muddying up your mix. So put it about 30. I'll do before and after. Just makes it a little bit more quieter, but it cleans up the sound a lot. And for the hi-hats, I'll do it up pretty high. This is before. This is after. The last tip I wanted to briefly touch was when you're chopping on drum breaks, don't feel obliged to use the whole drum break for all the drums. Feel free to mix and match a bit. I often don't use kicks when it comes to these old drum loops. They never have the sub frequencies I want, and I reckon the top end kind of sounds a bit shitty. I think with the snare and the hi-hat, they sort of embrace that vintage style when you chop them up, and you can make them sound really clean and modern, but the kick I can never get to sound great. Like, it's very rare I use the kick from the drum loop. I prefer to just grab my own and use the snare and the hi-hat and grab a kick from my own drum packs and just add it in as well. So I just added a kick on. And now if I play it with the drum loop, it's going to sound pretty good. This is before using effects to glue it together. I'm not going to talk about it in this video. This is just some basic tips. This is a good solid foundation for a drum loop. Sounds pretty good. That's before recording any MIDI in. That's before adding any effects to glue it together. Having a solid foundation is always a great start to any beat. Drums are always a good foundation to start with, and these drums sound great. Thank you for watching, everyone. Hopefully you learned something, and I'll see you next time.